Would it help if I took my mute button off, or should I just keep it on? Some people would probably love if I just kept it on, Bob. Uh,
I'll take
how
the
are you?
fifth. I'll take the fifth on that, Greg.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I'm sure you will. It's great to see you. It was really such a wonderful annual that we all participated in, many of us in Denver. The vibe seemed really good. I saw a certain pep in people's step when it came to just working together, just a feeling of confidence and family. What was your takeaway on the vibe?
I agree, Greg. I do think that part of the reason for the pep in the step is that that was such a big convention center and everybody was late to their next meeting. But honestly, I do think that we had a really nice uptick in sentiment compared to last year for obvious reasons. It would have been, can you imagine what it would have been like if the 10-year had behaved the last couple weeks and we were still writing a bunch of refis? But no, I do think that so many of our members got a lot out of the content and, of course, the unparalleled opportunity to meet with everyone they do business with under one roof and in a city which was almost setting record highs before it got cold on Wednesday. So, yeah, really great convention all around.
How do we keep the momentum going? How do we keep that collaboration and the togetherness moving as we finish the year and head into the next one?
Yeah, I think that you're looking at mortgage lenders who have been through a really extremely difficult 2 years, and the ones who are still here standing are the ones who know that the way to make it through and to prosper is to work together, compete in a vigorous but respectful way, and live to see a better day. We think that next year will be a significant increase on the volumes this year, even with this little backup in rates. And so I think the people who are still at this are the right people.
Well, we have something pretty important happening tomorrow, and I have seen you on stage talking about it. I saw you at great length discuss the presidential election at Housing Wire in Dallas. You were amazing. You went on before I did. Talk about big shoes to fill. I mean, it's not enough that you're probably a size 12 and I'm a size 8.5, and I'm not afraid to admit it, Bob. But and you're amazing on there. You're one of the best storytellers I've ever heard. And my takeaway from you on that was, and paraphrasing obviously, but I want to know your opinion, is kind of like, be careful what you wish for. Like, we know what we have with the Democratic administration, and so I'm not going to put words into your mouth, but I know you're prepared. You made that very clear that you're prepared either way, and you've poured a lot of time and energy and resources going to the RNC, the DNC, and things like that. But what's your opinion, Bob, on what's going to end up being better for this business?
Right. Well, I think the thing that some people forget is that the Democratic Party is very much a party that favors the activities of FHA and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And the Republican Party, generally speaking, is for a smaller government footprint in mortgage lending. So what I said in Dallas, and I'll repeat today, is that if you are a lender that is sick and tired of being sick and tired of the CFPB and other regulators over-regulating the industry, perhaps coming at you with an enforcement order, then you would certainly get relief from that in the Trump administration. On the other hand, if you are a lender who is invested appropriately, while reluctantly, in all of the things you need to do to stay on the right side of the compliance and regulatory regime, and you rely heavily on Fannie and Freddie and FHA, a Democratic administration would be much more likely to see an expansive role for the GSEs versus a Republican one that might view constricting their footprint more favorably and perhaps take steps to take them out of conservatorship. So it was really I guess I would say, a reminder that there are different things at play in this election. And as you said, MBA will be ready no matter what happens. But that was just my advice to people considering how the mortgage policies of the two administrations might differ.
Man, you had something very interesting to say on the stage. You always do at MBA Annual. I'm going to share it with our guests, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions about it.
Is a major goal, but on the other hand, we get the Basel proposal, and even low and moderate income Americans. Someone has to bring order to this mess. That's why MBA is strongly calling for the creation of a national housing director. Under our proposal, a housing director would focus solely on housing and oversee every housing policy, no matter which agency it comes from, and spot contradictory rules from a mile away. Ultimately, the housing director would stop agencies from stifling us and start the long overdue process of empowering us to help even more Americans.
So, Bob, this is something that's been kicked around in years past. Your predecessor, David Stevens, was in favor of this as well. Why is this coming up now, and what's the thought behind it?
Greg, one of the most frustrating things for me and for our industry in working with the Biden administration has been all of the times that they say one thing about housing and housing finance, and then the actions of parts of their administration go in completely the opposite direction. The example I used there in Denver was Basel III, where the administration is at the forefront of articulating the importance of low to moderate income lending to first-time home buyers, lending to minority home buyers, reducing the racial home ownership gap. And we fully support all of those things really strongly. But how can you have that as your stated goal and then have Basel III come in and say, we're going to require way more capital and make it more expensive and less available to do loans with low down payments? Who do those loans with low down payments go to? The very groups that they say they care the most about. And I could go on, I could take the rest of this time we have with other examples. So that's what spurred me to say, look, this is not a new idea. As you mentioned, Dave Stevens advocated for it several years ago. But it seems like a really ripe time to say someone has to bring order to the mess. And when there is an arm of the administration that's about to propose a rule or take a step that moves in precisely the opposite direction from what helps housing and helps Americans, then somebody ought to be coordinating that and stopping it before it happens.
All right. So the detractors would say, and I don't know how I feel about it yet. So I'm looking to you now to tell me why. The detractors would say, well, Basel III, that's been unwound a little bit, and that's being looked at again, and you didn't have this person in place even so. How would you respond to that? That you didn't need that housing director to push back and show the powers to be that maybe it's not such a good idea?
So, Greg, why in the world have we wasted a year and millions of dollars trying to get that message across that it was a nutty proposal from the start? Why not just stop it from happening in the first place?
Okay.
It really confuses the market. And I'll tell you, that, as you've heard me say before, there's servicing and warehouse lending aspects of Basel III that are really bad too. You have seen banks take steps just with the proposal, not even a final proposal or a rule, to get out of warehouse lending. It's directly related to the capital charges that Basel III had. So it does a great deal of harm, even if it never becomes law.
Well, I think the thing that I want to know about, it's so interesting, the thought of a housing director is how much power would they have? Who would they roll up under? Those are my first two questions.
Sure, and I'll acknowledge I had an employee of one of the bureaus that vexes us frequently say, gee, I love to hear an industry guy complain about overregulation, and his solution is one more regulator. So I acknowledge that it does seem perverse on the cover. However, what we would envision is that because these agencies that put out all the conflicting rules are part of the administration, clearly the housing director would have to be a member of the administration. So the president would appoint this person. And you could say, okay, well, that means that it's just going to push harder in one direction. We're just looking for consistency. We acknowledge that the landscape shifts and that elections have consequences, but having all of this contradictory things come from various parts of the administration, we think if there were a coordinating function that was empowered to look into all of this. And I understand that some of these agencies are independent. You're never going to fully tell a bank regulatory body what to do, but you can at least have the conversation and say, look, you're doing this, your sister agency is doing that. They're at direct odds with each other. Let's row with the same oar and move in the direction that the administration thinks is right.
Would the hope be that the MBA would have a hand in selecting that person or making suggestions to the administration?
Absolutely. We would certainly have a seat at that table. And you know, I'm not saying that we would unilaterally say, here's your name, but we would certainly have a seat at the table.
Are there people that come to mind? I'm sure there are, you know, a type of sort of comp using a mortgage, using mortgage vernacular, somebody you think would be well-rounded enough to be in that role?
Yes, I'm not going to give you any names, Greg, because I don't want to queer the process. But yes, there certainly are people who have, in my ideal candidate would be somebody who's been in one of the seats, understands the importance of having other agencies do things in concert as opposed to opposed to one another.
And have you had conversations with people, you know, some of these types of people, about would the interest be there, even though you're not going to mention names? And is the interest there if you have?
There's definitely interest there, but I'll be frank with you. We proposed this in the summer of a presidential election year. So we know that nothing was going to happen until after the election. So we'll take this up much more seriously with whoever wins the White House.
Speaking of after the election, let's talk about triggers, because that has been rolled up into the National Defense Act bill, and I appreciate all the work that you and your colleagues have done to push that forward. Those annoying triggers, it looks like, are going to go away. I mean, the NDAA is always approved. What's your level of confidence that triggers are going to be disposed of? Is it at 100%?
No, and I'll tell you why, Greg. It's in the Senate version of the bill, and we're very grateful to Senator Hagerty from Tennessee and Senator Reid from Rhode Island and Senator Scott, who is with the Banking Committee, to get us into that point. So in the Senate side, we are as close to 100% as you could be, but it does have to go through the House, and we have to make sure that Chairman McHenry, House Financial Services, and his minority member, Maxine Waters, are good with it in the final package. So we're in conversation daily with both of those offices, and we are very hopeful that it will make it through the House as well. So Senate, close to 100, House, I mean, I don't know if I'll give you a number. Kilmer will probably kill me, but I'll say 75% in the House.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't it depend on who's running both bodies coming out of tomorrow, or whenever it shakes out?
Well, I mean, it could. I think the conversations, the bipartisan conversations that have occurred, have pretty much locked it in. And the House and Senate you have today is the same one you'll have in the lame duck when this will be done. So yeah, elections matter, but not so much for this.
There you go. Yeah, because it's not kicking in until next year. Let's talk about affordability. Man, it's really punishing right now. I watched Laura Escobar, the new MBA chair. I was really impressed with what she had to say up there on stage. I mean, what a presence, and very passionate. I'm just so excited to see what she's going to be able to accomplish. I feel like she's really got our back. Some of the stats that she shared, to build a house now, more than $11,000, rather, to produce a loan, more than $11,000 per IMB. A cost to build a house, $390,000, of which $93,000, according to her, of that is due to government regulation. Labor and building materials up 31%, insurance costs up 52% in the last 5 years, property taxes up 18%. I mean, is there any end in sight? What is your level of concern about affordability, and what can change this? What can turn it around?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about it, Greg, because the American dream is alive and well for people of a certain age, but I'm worried about our younger population who sees these costs and says, geez, I'm going to be 50 years old before I can afford a house. And that's terrible for the country. And Laura's statistics were stark, but I'll give you one thing that that gives me some optimism. The presidential campaigns almost never talk about housing. And as you've seen this cycle, both of them are, because they're hearing it straight from their voters, these ones who are concerned that the American dream might not be within reach. And while there have been a lot of proposals on housing, the demand side ones, like down payment assistance, aren't frankly of that much interest, because we all know that the demand far outstrips the supply. But the supply side ones, and remember that Laura at Lennar is with a big builder, so she knows this firsthand. If we could use the tax code to incent builders who are going to build, let's say, a subdivision, but it pencils out to $449,000 for the average sales price. If we could use the tax code to bring that down to a level that's affordable at, say, 100% of the area median income, or 80%, or whatever makes sense, I think that would be a very constructive way to stimulate building at levels Americans can afford. That's the important caveat.
Yeah, you and your colleagues at the MBA called on other members to push YIMBY, onto the floor, into a bill, one or the other, or both. Yes, in my backyard, and the idea is changing zoning potentially. I personally am not in favor of that. Selfishly, I'll admit it. I live in a neighborhood with single family dwellings. I don't necessarily want a condo put next to me. So, shame on me, I guess. I'm just being raw and real with you. Your position on that, and aren't there other things that can be done, Bob? I mean, you've got 640 million government-owned acres in this country. We've got landlords colluding to keep rents high. We've got institutional investment pouring into this country. We've got 15 million vacant properties. Isn't there more than we can do before we start changing zoning and breaking ground in people's neighborhoods?
Sure. Let me talk about the zoning though for a minute. I'm not talking about, and I don't think anybody's really talking about, putting a high-rise condo next to your fancy single-family house in your comfy neighborhood. I mean, shit, I live in a fancy neighborhood too. We've got a zoning fight going on in Bethesda and Chevy Chase, Maryland, as we speak. But I am talking about duplexes or accessory dwelling units, or maybe even, God forbid, a fourplex. So I do think there are ways that in populated areas where people want to live, that are close to work and close to good schools, that we can do more. And you cite an enormous number of federal acres. Well, guess what? I mean, you don't want to live on a testing range in Nevada. So I think
True.
there are government-owned parcels that are close to population areas, and I very much agree that that's another area that we should look at and permit development there. But I do think that if you did what Minneapolis did and said, look, you can put duplexes as well as single family by right, I don't think it's going to ruin the neighborhood, and it really is going to help, because they're places people want to live.
So Bob, I'm going to take you down a road here. I know you knew I'd take you down real quickly, and I will proceed carefully because I understand.
Let her rip.
Yeah, I mean, I understand there's politics involved in everything, and you know what? I've really come to the conclusion recently, and I'm at peace with it, that we all need each other. We just do. Like, you need support to keep the MBA running. We need certain things on the IMB side, and FICO and ICE and all these guys. Like, they control a lot, but they're so necessary. Like, we everybody needs each other. So I'm coming at this from that lens. I want you to know that. Okay.
Sure.
So December 1st, 2023, you were quoted as saying, MBA is deeply concerned about the sharp rising cost of the tri-merge credit report. Today, in light of these media reports about another round of unexplained sharp price increases, we reiterate our concerns. That was December 1st. October 17th, you said, over the past 2 years, MBA has voiced our frustration with the lack of transparency behind the ongoing price hikes for tri-merge credit reports and other credit reporting products. While FICO and the credit reporting agencies are private companies free to set their prices as they wish, raising prices once again would hurt the consumer at a time of continued affordability challenges. So obviously there's a lot floating around there in the ether. It does look like FICO is going to raise their scores again, to the extent that you can make a comment, right? What is that comment at this time here on, November the 4th?
Well, my comment is very simple. Lenders have no choices in providers for these services, and government bodies require them to obtain them. How then is it reasonable that the costs keep going up very significantly when the product is essentially the same as it's been? One would expect that technologically enabled products like this over time would get cheaper, not more expensive. And it's pretty clear that the ability of the providers in this space to set pricing without regard to market share, because the lenders are required to use their services, it's just not right.
It would help if I was on my screen unmuting again. I seem to be having a lot of these unmuting issues. I was actually going back to look at your, before we started this conversation, I'm really enjoying it so much. I went back and looked at your history, because I know you ran mortgage companies before. Like, it's so unique to have somebody in your position where you know how we feel, right? So, from that lens, putting that hat back on as a guy that had so much success running a mortgage company, give others that are running mortgage companies, give others that depend on IMBs and other lending institutions some words of wisdom as to what we can be doing to make things better.
Well, first, I would say that we have made tremendous strides in the past few years in having really key government leaders, both on Capitol Hill and in the administration, understand the vital role that IMBs play, and that IMBs are by far the predominant lender to low and moderate income, minority, and first-time home buyers, and that actions that the government took discouraged banks from having a bigger role in mortgage lending, and IMBs have admirably stepped into that void. So that is something that we used to scream from the mountaintops, and we never heard the echo come back, and now the echo's coming back. The administration and the Congress very clearly recognize this. So I just want people to understand that we fight at this every day, but we're really getting much stronger and better responses than we were before. And the other thing I would say is very simply that you are purveyors of the American dream. I like to say during the pandemic, when Jay Powell cut rates to zero, that didn't help a single homeowner until a mortgage banker made the loan, staffed up, invested private capital to get the job done and get those refinances done and those purchases made that really saved our economy. So never forget the important role that you play, and we'll always have your back at the MBA.
I bet you're just wishing for some smooth terrain. I mean, you came in August of 2018 to the MBA, and shortly thereafter, you're dealing with COVID. And then we've got the margin calls and all that hysteria that went on, and then we had all of that production, and then we had the complete opposite. The world was falling apart. 8 consecutive quarters of losing money, right? And that now we look up, we think rates are getting better, they're getting worse. I mean, does this just come with the territory? Can we just get you like a runway without any bumps for maybe a year, maybe 2 years?
So I used to wish for that, Greg, and then through hard experience, I've realized that's just never going to be how it is. Every once in a while, I come into the office on a given morning and I say, this thing's taken care of, that thing's taken care of, feels kind of all right. And then boom, something else shows up. So it's the nature of our business. We all know how cyclical it is. The cycles have been exaggerated lately, but it's always been that way. And frankly, it's what keeps you young. It's part of the fun.
Yeah. Well, I think you know that I've been out there trying to advocate for the business, generated the hashtag all of us, and there's been a lot of momentum around that. And I hope that we can get to a place where there is more collaborating, where there's less infighting amongst IMB's leaders. And I feel like there has been less, Bob, but the thing I'm looking forward to the most, and I'm curious to know how you feel about this, is just seeing who the leaders are of tomorrow. Like, we know who runs the big bad IMBs, right? They've been doing it for a long time. They've made a lot of money, whatever. Can't wait to see who the next great young leaders are, because they're going to grab that baton and they're going to be repping us for the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, and there are some really encouraging signs toward that end in Denver, Greg, when we had 62 certified mortgage bankers across the stage. That is a really significant number of people who are really taking it seriously and becoming leaders in this industry. And we also graduated a class of future leaders. And so we're putting a lot of resources into making sure that the next generation of leadership in this industry is up to the task, has ways to be mentored, but also to express their creative new ways of doing things. So that is an area where I'm increasingly optimistic.
Well, there's a lot of things I really like about you. I consider you a friend now, someone that I can lean on. And I appreciate that your willingness to communicate with anybody out there. You're very
Sure.
available. You're very willing and open to hearing people out, but you also love to have a great time. There's been some there've been some videos floating around of you at the Katy Perry
Oh
concert.
boy.
I happen to have one. I think I've got the best one, and it's queued up. I don't have to play it right now, but I mean, you were in your feels. You were having a great time. Can I just play a second or two of it, Bob? Is
Well,
that okay?
I can't say no. It's going to be the funniest part of the show.
Well, I mean, it's been out there. People have already released, various iterations of this, but this was my own, and this is all out of love. Like, this business is hard as shit. It's hard enough, right? We're all stressing out all the time. So the fact that we've got a leader like you that can let his hair down, what's left of it, and have a great time, like, that is super endearing to me. I absolutely love it. So I share this out of love, and I want to just know where you got your moves from. So very concert. Got the hands going back and forth. Just doing the hands on the chest. Here we go.
He was looking right at me, man.
You know what? Do you know that she talked about me on stage? Did you catch that?
I do, but you had to pay money for that. She was looking right at me with no recompense.
That is true. She even climbed a scaffold for you. I mean, she got closer to you.
Okay,
Bob
so
Broeksmit,
you want to know the real story there?
yeah.
I
What
was
is it?
standing right behind Stan Middleman, who paid for the concert, as my wife very helpfully pointed out when I said, "Honey, she was looking right at me."
Yeah. Hey, look, before we go, I wanted to ask about MORPAC and the Mortgage Action Alliance. How can people get involved in more visibility in the NBA? And I'm going to ask you this because part of all of us is this 98% that really doesn't feel like it has a voice at all. Like, we've got C-suite people like me and whatever, but like the other people that are the underbelly, the engine of this business, if they want to get involved in the NBA, is there a way to do it, and how?
So the Mortgage Action Alliance, the really great thing about it is that you, as a leader of a company, can put on a company campaign, and you might say, well, why would I do that? If your employees are more invested in our industry, they know what the issues are, and you call on them to help you when something comes up before Congress or in a state house, as increasingly it does, and we make it really easy for them to participate and write a virtual letter to their representatives or senators, then they feel like they're more invested, they have a stake in what's going on, and you respect them enough to say, I need your help in making this a better industry, which helps all of us. It's just a win-win. So MBA.org, look up Mortgage Action Alliance. We need more people so that our voice is louder. And of course, MORPAC, if you can afford a few bucks for our political action committee, I can't tell you the difference that makes when we go on the Hill and get representatives and senators' ears because we have helped them with their campaigns.
Well, I'm glad to know you're going to be in that same seat for at least, 3 more years?
God willing, and the creek don't rise.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy to get this time with you, Bob. Appreciate people getting the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. Next Monday is Veterans Day, and we're going to talk to an Iraqi war vet, a Purple Heart recipient, as we have another edition of One-on-One. You'll be hearing more about that in the days ahead as we do this again, all over again on Monday. Really appreciate your time, Bob. Thanks so much.
Greg, one closing remark. I'm going to be at the polls all day tomorrow. I'm an election judge at my precinct in Maryland. I get there at 6 in the morning, leave at 8 at night. I'm devoting my day, as I have for more than 20 years, to this great American cause, and I sure hope you'll all get out there and vote.
Where is that? Where will you be? Are you giving away the location?
Chevy Chase, Maryland. Yeah, absolutely. Come and see me.
I already voted. Can I vote twice?
You may not, and I will catch you.
Yeah. In the last 48 hours, I voted, had my blood drawn, and gotten a flu shot. What do you think about that, Bob?
I think you're a great American, Greg.
Thank you. The least painful thing was voting. That was actually very easy. So
good.
Enjoy the rest of your week. I appreciate you spending some time with me on One-on-One.
Absolutely, Greg. Thank you.
I'd appreciate it. Also, my thanks to Donna Chachevsky. She is just the best. We'll see you again next Monday. So long.